Right now, get up to a $15 gift card after rebate when you purchase select Superstart batteries exclusively at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly.
Shop Superstart Premium, Extreme, or Platinum batteries at O'Reilly Auto Parts and get up to a $15 gift card after rebate. O-Reward members can also get a $5 reward with their battery purchase. For power, performance, and reliability, choose Superstart. Only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
Chris
Hearing
Dowhouse,
about Mr. Pointless in fantasy
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Welcome to the Week 4 episode of the Operation Domination Fantasy Football Show. I am not your normal host. That would be Dan Mader, who we are still have out with some technical difficulties, hoping to get him back as soon as humanly possible. But in the meantime, we're holding down the ship over here on the Operation Domination Football Show. I'm Adam LaRue. You cannot see that in the name tag. I'll get that fixed here in a moment. But in the meantime, we also have the name tag that I'm borrowing, and that's Chase over here to my right. Chris below me. What's up, gentlemen? How we doing?
Doing pretty good. We know our names. I think that's a good start for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey,
We're doing okay on yeah.
Yeah, big week in the NFL coming up, and this past week, one of the biggest pieces of news: Carolina Panthers might not stink. Look at that. They switched quarterbacks, and they beat the crap out of a Raiders team that just beat a Ravens team that, look, we don't know quite a lot about this Ravens team yet. I think they're still working on their identity, but they did beat a good Cowboys team and, played the Chiefs pretty close. So that Raiders team, while they're very flawed, especially in the secondary, it's a solid win for Carolina. So what did you guys think about that? Were you surprised with the beating that they just the Panthers managed to give the Raiders there?
I don't know if I was surprised. I mean, Adam, you kind of called the shot with, this is the bump that happens usually when a coach gets fired, the new coach comes in. This was a different kind of bump. They brought a quarterback in that actually was competent. Bryce Young had been just atrocious the last couple of years, and we talked about the 366 that Andy Dalton had put up in the one game that he had played last year, and he came out and lit it up again and basically did what Bryce Young had done in combined 2 games. Andy Dalton was able to do in the first half. So I mean, it's pretty stark that Bryce Young was basically holding this team back. Now I'm not going to all of a sudden act like the Carolina Panthers are juggernaut, but what I do like, Chase, and I do think something that people need to talk about is, there was people were quick to start dumping on Carolina as being a terrible franchise, and they have the least talented roster. Is that still the narrative now, Chase, or is it something maybe we're talking about a little bit different?
I'm not going to ever be a fan of Mr. Tepper, their owner down there, so I'm not necessarily ready to call them not a guard. But they do have some talent. We thought they had some talent coming into this season. Everybody was excited about the idea of Deontay Johnson. I mean, I don't know how excited everybody was, but I mean, the talk was that Deontay Johnson going there, he would continue to be a target monster. He was going to be their lead. They were going to be able to throw to him all over the place, move him around. Now they actually maybe have the opportunity to do that since they have someone, Chuba Hubbard back. Unfortunate Adam Thielen going down with an injury for a while, but they still have Xavier Legette and Jonathan Mingo. They've got some pieces there, and I mean, they showed last week when they play hard, they can win a game. So, I'm not necessarily ready to turn the narrative around on the franchise, but that's largely due to the fault of the owner, not necessarily the fault of anybody on the field. We'll see.
Yeah, totally. Listen, let's kick it back to you. We have some more quarterback news there, and that's that we could be on Jordan Love watch a little bit earlier than we potentially expected. Look, I mean, he practiced a little bit last week. He was even, some conversations about him potentially playing last week, and that I think seemed unlikely even when we talked about it, last week's show. But it was still something that the team hadn't ruled out. So with another week, it gets like probably at least a little more likely. And again, that's a little earlier than I think I expected for sure. And that seems to be the consensus that we expected a little bit longer. He was like a fringe IR candidate. But Chase is a Packers fan. How do you feel about it?
If he can play, I kind of hope he can play. He still gives us the best chance to win. There is no quarterback controversy in Green Bay, everybody, so calm down. Malik Willis has played passingly well these last 2 weeks, got us the win, and I think it's more a testament to Matt LaFleur's coaching than anything in that he put together a game plan where Malik Willis could pass the ball, use his talents. We've known he could be a talented runner. We used his talents. We got ourselves a couple of wins, and hey, we're off and running. That's exactly what you want out of your backup quarterback. I was skeptical, knowing what Malik Willis had done heretofore in his career, but I think Matt LaFleur did a great job with it. Now, yeah, Jordan Love went through pregame warmups last week, and that always felt a little early to me. I'm sure it felt early to everybody else. They had said when it first came out, 3 to 6 weeks. Well, if he comes back this Sunday, that's dead on 3 weeks from from when it happened. It's big game against Minnesota. It's for first place in the division. A surprising Minnesota team that not a lot of people thought would be where they're at right now. I mean, I know we're in 3 games into the season, but they've performed well. And like I said, I'm appreciative of what Malik Willis did. I'm not as distraught about the backup quarterback position as I was last season or as I was a few weeks ago. But Jordan Love gives the Packers the best chance to win. He gives the players on that team the best chance to be sustainably fantasy relevant. And that's everybody from Josh Jacobs all the way through to the tight ends. So if he can play, I'm all for it, as long as he doesn't get hurt again. But any single guy we're talking about tonight could get hurt again. So I would love to see it, though.
Well, speaking of injuries, look, we typically leave that for Brian in the Thursday night show. But one that we do want to talk about because it's the consensus first overall pick in your fantasy drafts, and a guy who I think we talked about it. He's the guy. If he plays, your team has a very good chance to win, and you have a big advantage if he's on the field and he's on your team. So, and that's Christian McCaffrey, who recently flew to Germany, go see a specialist. And look, I think this is the type of thing that you typically see when players are kind of grasping for straws, looking for something to figure out what's going on that they can't quite figure out, where they're, traveling all over the place trying to figure something out. So, Chris, if you are a Christian McCaffrey fantasy manager, if you, were lucked out, got the first overall picked Christian McCaffrey, are you hitting the panic button any more, any less than you were prior? Do you, or do you think we see him before the half of the season?
I think it depends on what your expectations were. Like, look, if you're thinking you're going to Christian McCaffrey straight off the IR in 4 weeks, that wasn't going to happen. They're going to be very overly cautious with him. I think that the most optimal, return date 6 to 8 weeks. 8 weeks from looking more likely, the norm, what you should expect. And so we've got about 4 weeks or 5 weeks until that happens, Adam. So what I think is happening is you have a guy who has plenty of time to kill in between. He can go around and find different things. I'm not necessarily worried about what he's doing. I think it's actually smart. We've seen Kobe Bryant do things like this. We see Terrell Owens do this for the Super Bowl and miraculously come back and dominate in that game. So it actually could be something that enhances him and quickens the process, not necessarily something I'm more worried about. I think it's Christian McCaffrey having a lot of money at his disposal and a guy who wants to be out there and wants to be optimal. One of the things that maybe fantasy owners might have a little bit of excitement, in my opinion, is that if the 49ers continue to struggle, there might be a little bit, a push to get him back versus them being super cautious with him. There might be that push that he will be mid-season versus, waiting back for that playoff stretch. So I think this is something not to necessarily read a tea leaf too much. And I think you should expect to get about 6 to 8 weeks out of Christian McCaffrey. He's not going to be playing anytime soon. So that's something just kind of, you're going to be holding your breath waiting for.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm not necessarily overly concerned. And to your point, the 49ers got a taste of, divisional football, right? Where, look, the spread might have been the spread, but any game especially in the division, it's any given Sunday regardless in the league. But, when you get those divisional matchups, it's a puncher's chance, So definitely, agree there. Not necessarily a massive sign of optimism, but, at the very least, hopefully he comes back this season. We're going to move out of our introduction / news, and we're going to get you into some DFS content. But we're going to do it in a really fun way. Chase, what do you have for us this evening?
All right. Yep. Welcome into the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar, everybody. It is time for this week's DFS Daily Cocktail. Reminder, we're doing the classic slate. We're doing a DraftKings classic slate on the main slate of games on Sunday, the day games and the afternoon games. We're not doing the night game. We're not doing any of the peripherals. There are 2 Monday night games again this week, so you've got all kinds of fun. You can still have Monday night if you lose out on Sunday, but if you listen to us, you shouldn't be losing out on Sunday. So here we go. Today, we're going to be making a variation of a Kentucky Mule, but since we are into football here, we are going to call it a Canton Mule, a Canton, Kentucky Mule here. So a mule you have to build in a copper mug, and you mix it right in the copper mug. So the copper mug for this game, the thing that we're building inside of here is the Washington-Arizona matchup. It's the highest point total of the week, 50.5 points right now for the over-under. Arizona is a 3.5 point favorite right now. But what you've got here is, you've got a good offense in Arizona. They've been, for the 3 weeks that we've seen, every piece of that offense has been fun to watch and usable.
Right now, get up to a $15 gift card after rebate when you purchase select Superstart batteries exclusively at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Well, Marvin Harrison had a little bit of a hiccup in week 1, but since then he has balled right out. This offense looks like it's hitting on all cylinders. And then last week, we see the Washington's, Commanders team that looks like it actually may have found themselves. They seem like they are getting the ball rolling and figuring out how they want to use this awesome weapon that they drafted in Jaden Daniels and how they want to use the pieces that they've put around him. So we are going to go with the quarterback there for the Commanders. That's going to be our quarterback this week. Jaden Daniels, 6,500 at DraftKings there. We're going to go with that. Arizona gives up the 11th most points to quarterbacks, and they've given up the 9th most points to running backs. And I know that he's a quarterback, and I know they have a running back there in Brian Robinson who should eat this week too. But with that running upside that Jaden Daniels gives you and the fact that they have struggled against the run as much as they have in Arizona, I really like Jaden Daniels' upside this week. 6,500. He's a little bit expensive, but you're not paying up for the super guys, and I think that you've got every opportunity to still score just as many points as the top plays this week. So we'll go with Jaden Daniels there. We're going to pair him up with his top wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, at 5,800. They finally showed a connection last week. It finally looked like they were willing to throw the ball downfield. I think it looks like the coaching staff is getting more confident in Jaden Daniels' ability to throw the ball and throw it downfield specifically. I think he's finding his confidence. I think that the chemistry is starting to develop there in that pass game. So we're going to pair him with Terry McLaurin there. Across from them in that same matchup, we are going to pay up a little bit, and we are going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. at 7,500. I mentioned he had the hiccup in week 1, but the last 2 weeks, he is wide receiver 4 overall. He has just 9 catches in that time, but he is catching scores and he is catching the ball deep downfield. The Commanders give up the most points in the league to opposing wide receivers, so I like the idea of going with Harrison here. We're going to be going with Daniels, McLaurin, and Harrison from that Washington-Arizona game. And now we're going to put some ice in this mug for this. And the ice to keep things cool is the Houston Texans DST. You're going to spend $3,000 on them. They are by far the cheapest of the touchdown plus favorites this week. There's 4 games that are about a touchdown spread right now. You've got New England at San Francisco, Kansas City at the Chargers, Denver at the Jets, and Jacksonville at the Houston Texans. That Houston Texans defense is by far the cheapest of those 4 teams. So if you're looking for a team that's supposed to pound their opponent, and you don't want to pay a whole heck of a lot, that's who we're going with there with the Houston Texans. Jacksonville has been absolutely terrible. They've given up the 6th most points to their opposing defensive units. The Texans give up the 3rd lowest pass completion in the league. They're sacking the opposing quarterback at the 3rd highest rate in the league. Trevor Lawrence has looked terrible. Nothing on that offense seems to be clicking right now. So we will be going with the Houston Texans. Now it's time to actually build the cocktail. So this is a bourbon cocktail, being a variation of a Kentucky Mule. If you've heard of a Moscow Mule with vodka, this is a Kentucky Mule variation, which means we're going to go with bourbon. And for this one, we're going to go with the good old chicken cock bourbon. Chicken cock's a nice drink to have if you're just standing around with friends, meeting somebody new for the first time, or or whatever. So we're going to go ahead and pour 2 shots of that. We're going to 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Heavy because we're in Wisconsin. Chicken cock right there. We'll park that right over there. All right. So our bourbon in this one, we're going to go with Carson Steele and Roma Dunze. We're going to start fleshing out our lineup here now. Steele, listen, I'm not the biggest fan of him. He's $5,500 this week. I'm not crazy on that price, but it allows us to get that backup running back at that little bit lower price who is playing the starting role this week. I think he's usable for one more week. This could be it for him, though. Hunt is still getting up to speed, so even if he does play, I know they signed him to the active roster, but even if he does play, he's still getting up to speed. Steele knows the offense right now and ran it pretty effectively last week. The Chiefs should chew the Chargers all to hell in this game. Samaje Perine is going to get the pass down work, or the bulk of the pass down work, but I think Steele is usable for one more week, and he should be able to eat in this game. And Adunze on the other side, $5,200 for him. He looks like Williams. He looks like he could be emerging as Caleb Williams' favorite target. Caleb Williams finally had a passing game last week that was something to be used. Sorry about that, Adam. But it looks like he is really comfortable with Roma Dunze. We thought that they would have chemistry coming into the year. We heard all the stories about them in preseason liking each other. The Rams give up the 2nd most points to opposing wide receivers. I know Keenan Allen looks like he's good. He may be back and play this week, but I've kind of come around on Odunze being a fantasy factor. I wasn't necessarily sure he was going to be able to do a whole lot this year with Keenan Allen on that team. But I think that Odunze has earned a regular spot in that rotation, and I think he's got the most chemistry, especially of their big 3 receivers. He's got the most chemistry there with Caleb Williams. So that's going to be our chicken cock bourbon there. Then we're going to add a half an ounce of lime juice. Now, listen, when you're talking about lime juice, I have nothing against Rose's lime juice, but Rose's lime juice looks like antifreeze because it is not fresh squeezed. Get it cloudy, get it fresh squeezed. It's going to taste a whole heck of a lot better in there. We're going to put our half ounce of lime juice in there, and that's going to be Pat Freiermuth, our tight end. I've told you before, I generally like paying up for tight end. Not this year. We're not paying up at tight end right now, especially right now with the way things have been rolling. Pat Freiermuth's only $3,900. He's got 4 catches in literally every game this season, like clockwork. Boom, boom, boom. Right? He's going to get you 4 catches. He's going to get you 30-something yards. He might score. That doesn't sound exciting, but nobody's been exciting this year. You can't tell from one week to the next who's going to be the best tight end or who's going to be a usable tight end. If he scores with 4 catches and 30-something 40 yards, he's got you 13, 14 points, and that's been a top 5 play basically this season for a tight end. He needs the touchdown to get there, but Indy does give up the 7th most points to opposing tight ends, so we're going to go with Pat Freiermuth there. We know that Arthur Smith, as much as we like to repeat our mantra, FAS, forget Arthur Smith around here, we can't forget that he does like to use his tight ends. So now we come to the part where I need help from you guys here. To build this thing and to make it a true mule, we need to put in some ginger beer. And we're going to be putting Krabby's ginger beer in here. It's an actually alcoholic ginger beer. It's not a ginger ale. It's not a non-alcoholic ginger beer. This is an actual full-fledged alcoholic ginger beer here. So we've got about 4.5 ounces of that we're going to put in there. And we are going to stir that to kind of chill that out. But while we're doing it, I'm going to talk to you guys about the running back 1 position. We're going to pay up for running back 1 this week. We're going to give it a shot here. We're going to pay up for either Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall, or Bijan Robinson. Okay. They've got good matchups. I think all three of them do. Barkley's got a good matchup, and he's been the number one running back in football, fantasy football this season, including literally the number one overall in both weeks 1 and 3. Breece Hall, a game against the Broncos, where the Broncos have been, I think they've given up the 11th most points to opposing fantasy running backs. This is a game that the Jets should be ahead. They should be able to pound the ball. Braylon Allen, even if he does get work in this, Breece Hall is still the alpha in that backfield. So they should be able to put up some points there on the run game. And then Bijan, it's been, he's due for some positive touchdown regression. Listen, he's got 6 red zone carries, which is more than he had all year last year inside the 5-yard line, for -1 yard and 1 touchdown. That's going to change. So I like the 3 matchups here for Barkley, Hall, and Bijan, but that's the order of their price this week too. Barkley is $8,000, Hall is $7,800. Bijan saves us a little bit more money at $7,400. We've got 2 slots left to fill. Our running back 1 that we're paying up for, depending on who we take here, that's going to limit who we can put in the flex position. But first to you, Adam, which of those 3 names do you like to, do you like the best this week? Or which of those 3 names do you think is actually going to give us the best price and the best return so that we can turn it around for the flex position?
For me, I think the optimal pick is Breece Hall. That Denver run defense is atrocious. And look, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers run defense against the Philadelphia Eagles has graded out very poorly as well, but they also missed Vita Vea last week and obviously part of the week prior. He returned to practice, I believe, today, if not yesterday. And it is looking like a solid bet to play this upcoming weekend. So that's going to be a boon for that run defense in Tampa Bay. And while I don't think that elevates them to being a great one, I think that's enough of a difference where I think the matchup against Denver for Breece Hall is a little bit better. And to your point, that game script is going to be pretty awesome, I think. So I'm leaning Breece Hall. I think these are all pretty great options, but Breece Hall is my choice.
Chris, out of Saquon, Breece Hall, or Bijan, who would you be going with this week?
Yeah,
knowing that we've made the decision to pay up.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think Adam makes a lot of great points about Breece Hall. I'm just a little concerned. I know Denver is, hemorrhaging points, but they do blitz a lot. I do wonder how that Jets offense is going to handle. They have a new right tackle playing this week. I know they checked the ball down well, but Denver's been tackling a little better as well. So I am curious to see how that game unfolds. I'm going to go with this guy who's been balling out. This has been the RB1 and Saquon Barkley. A.J. Brown still hasn't returned to practice. Devonta Smith had a concussion, or I'm not really sure what happened to poor guy. Goddard was their offense pretty much. And so I think even if Saquon isn't necessarily as effective between the tackles, he is able to attack those edges, and he's still going to be involved in the passing attack. A guy who has, been that guy that you can look for and is kind of the heart and soul of that offense right now with all the banged up injuries that they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's definitely some good matchups here. Tampa Bay's they've given up the 6th most points to opposing running backs, against the run there. So, I mean, he's got a real opportunity there to do some damage. Breece Hall, though, I agree with Adam that the game script is awesome. That's why I picked them. Nobody voting for Bijan. I guess I'm going to be the tiebreaker here between Barkley and Hall. Now, knowing that we're paying up here, I'm not crazy about some of the options that we're going to have here for our flex position, but I think that there are some things to be had. And honestly, as weird as it sounds, I actually like the cheaper options if we pay up for Barkley. So we're going to plug Saquon into our lineup here at 8,000. And that is going to leave us with $4,600 to spend in our flex spot. Okay. That's going to be our garnish. Part of our garnish here is going to be a lime wheel. We've already got that thing pre-cut. And now also we're going to take some mint and put that in there, but we'll get to that in a second. First, we've got to get to the player that we're going to put in it. So we've chosen Barkley. That means we got $4,600 left. Here's some of the receiver names that you can expect to see at around 4,600, 4,500. Josh Downs at 46. He's actually the most expensive one of this group. Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas in New England. Dontavian Wicks at 4,500. Or we could have Whittington or Ty Johnson from the Rams They're at 4,500. So those are the wide receiver options we have: Downs, Douglas, Wicks, or one of the Rams number 3-4 guys. For the running back position, we're not taking Shipley because we already took the Eagles running back, and I don't think there's a hole there. I don't think he's got a big enough role yet to work. Corum is at 4,600. Jaleel McLaughlin is at 4,500. Daria Gumbawale at 4,500. Trey Sermon at 4,500, or Emmanuel Wilson, who actually led the Packers in rushing last week and scored the big touchdown, at 4,400. So when we listen to those options, like I said, there's not great options, but I think that there is something to be had there. Chris, which one of those names actually stands out to you at all? Be something that you think has a shot this week to pay off for us?
Chase, that's hard for me. I mean, right there, I'm going to go a tight end because usually I find value at tight end more so than that you guys are naming for me. If I had to pick one, oh, man, I'm not loving any of those options.
Do the wide receivers or do the running backs sound more appealing to you then? Downs, Douglas, Wicks, or the Rams? Corum, McLaughlin, Ogunbowale, Wilson, Sermon?
I'd probably go Ogunbowale, even though it has the least upside, just because I think there's the floor. He has a clear passing. Even if Pierce is healthy enough to play, it doesn't matter. Akers and Pierce do not play in their late downs. Texas offense has been struggling to kind of open up holes as of late without Mixon. So you do pass the ball. I would probably go with the safest guy in that situation because the rest of those guys, I just feel like, Downs, for example, I understand the upside, but I don't even know if Richardson can hit the broads out of a barn right now, much less the guy who's coming, off of IR. So I'm really worried about kind of those receivers options. McLaughlin, will he play? Beatty just, got rotated in this last week. So could he get phased out? Sean Payton talked about only wanting to play 2 running backs, and he has like 8 on his roster. So that's a lot of the guys that I'm a little bit worried about right there.
All right. So we got a vote for Daria Gumbawale with Joe Mixon possibly missing again, banged up Pierce, and then a fragile Akers in front of him that who knows how long he'll be on the field for. Adam, where would you be going for this slot here?
I think my lean is towards Pop Douglas there. I think that game script they could be throwing a lot. Look, I know the Niners just lost to a very banged up Rams team, but like I said in the open, I think a lot of that's divisional football, man. I think those divisional games are misleading as far as talent, as far as where teams are at. It's Sean McVay versus Kyle Shanahan. We've got Sean McVay running fake punts on his side of the field in the first half. Like, that's divisional football. So look, I think that the Niners are going to whoop the Patriots, and as a result, I think that we're going to see, the Patriots getting that volume, and I think a lot of that's going to be the checkdowns to guys like Pop Douglas. So that's the avenue that I'd look at personally.
Chase, I'm going to change my vote. I'm going to go with Adam and Pop Douglas. I mean, he was squeaky wheel as well last week and got the ball targeted, so I think there's a chance maybe to get some targets.
That's going to make it unanimous then, because he was the one name that really stuck out to me as a guy that felt like he had a safe chance to pop here. No pun intended. If Love is back, I like Wicks as a player, but we don't know how much of the time he'll be on the field versus how much of the time Christian Watson will be on the field. The Rams run wide receivers is anybody's guess right now as to who's going to emerge from week to week. Like I said, the running backs we weren't really crazy about. You gave some reasons why there, but Pop Douglas there leading that team in targets, and you can throw on the 49ers as good a defense as they are, good a team as they are giving up the 7th most points to opposing fantasy wide receivers. So we'll go with Pop Douglas in that. That gives us a lineup of Daniels at quarterback, Saquon and Carson Steele at the running back position, Marvin Harrison Jr., Terry McLaurin, Roma Dunze at wide receiver, Pat Freiermuth at tight end. We're going with Pop Douglas as our cheap flex option, and the DST is going to be the Texans. Now we're going to add that garnish here. We're going to go with a mint sprig, and if you've heard people like, oh, crush peppermint leaves, you smell them. Well, we're going to take that mint, we're going to put it right in our hand. We're going to spank it like that, just like we expect the Packers to spank the Minnesota Vikings this Sunday. That's going to release the oils in that. It's going to release the aromas. It's also going to look really nice on your drink there. That's a Canton Mule, folks.
There it is.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, cheers to that. Cheers to that team. That's going to be awesome. Hey, you want to participate in things like what Chase has been talking about?
Hey there, I'm proud to say that Underdog Fantasy is the newest sponsor of our show, and it's my favorite place to play fantasy games. No waivers, no trades, no lineup settings, just best ball for season-long drafters all year long. And you gotta check out Pick'em. It's so easy to play. Just pick 2 to 5 stats of your favorite players. You can choose whether they go higher or lower on those stats, and if you can pick 5 in a row, you can win 20 times your money. Sound like fun? Well, guess what? You can sign up with promo code FFAdvice today to claim your special pick, plus a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. I cannot wait to see your entries.
All right. We're going to get into Chris' segment here in a moment, but first we want to run through a couple questions you guys have been asking here. First of all, it's Matt Dude. Did I win the trade if I got DK, JK, Scary Terry, and Worthy for CD and Waddle? Chris, what are your thoughts there?
I think that you won possibly if it's a 3-receiver league that you're starting, but I don't necessarily love it. I think it's kind of a wash in my opinion. I think CD's the best player of all the players you're talking about, and I think Chase will talk about that. He's like the best player. I know Waddle has some downside, especially with the quarterback situation, but Scary Terry had a great game. I don't know if Terry McLaurin is going to continue to hit him down the field. He doesn't necessarily look down the field like he needs to. DK's been great. JK's been awesome. So I do think that you've won. I just think the CD is such a star. It's hard to kind of just say that you definitely won that one from my book.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. I do really like what DK's shown so far this year. Go ahead, Chase.
No, I was going to say, I don't think you came out behind in the trade. I don't necessarily know, if you won the trade, but I don't necessarily think you lost it either. You've got assets there you can use. I don't know what you needed for running backs. If you got J.K. Dobbins, though, he looks like he could be a fun asset to have this year. DK has given you some good production. Terry McLaurin is going to be up and down. Worthy's going to be up and down. We're never going to be necessarily sure when either one of them is going to hit. CD Lamb, on the other hand, like Chris said, is the best player in that trade. I typically like to try to get the best player back. Doesn't mean I'm trying to, screw over everybody when I'm making trades. But if it's going to be a multiple for one or many for fewer, I like to have the side that's got the more condensed quality in it. Jalen Waddle is a hell of a talent, but we're not necessarily sure what that pass game is going to look like this season, if and when Tua gets back, or whoever ends up taking over as the backup or actual starter at this point in Miami. But CD is the best player overall. If you made your roster deeper and it helped, if the drop from CD to DK is made up by J.K. Dobbins being an improvement over one of your other running backs, then you came out just fine.
Yeah, tend to agree. Team Money. He has a 10-man PPR league with Burrow, Josh Jacobs, James Conner, CD Lamb, I believe. Yeah, CD, Jamar Chase, Dalton Kincaid, DK Metcalf, Jamison Williams, Jerome Ford, Darnell Mooney, Watson, Worthy, Brooks on IR. He asks, should I trade Connor and Jamison Williams for DJ Moore and Brian Robinson? Chris, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to go, that's a wash at best for me. I don't really see the upside. I think B-Rob's been pretty good, but so has Connor. I think that's a wash right there. Jameson Williams, you might be worried that maybe he's a flash in the pan. I don't think so. And DJ Moore's been struggling. I mean, the guy's had his first biggest game with 78 yards this past week. So I don't think that's a move that I'm pulling. I think that's at best a wash.
Yeah, I tend to I would stick with Connor and Jameson Williams. We saw what Jameson Williams is capable of. DJ Moore doesn't look like he's got the chemistry going right now with Williams either. Brian Robinson in Washington, and he's going to eat this week. He's going to eat this week because Eckler's going to miss. They've already named him out. So it's B-Rob's game for this week. But James Conner has been very good in that offense. Like I mentioned, that offense is hitting on all cylinders right now. He's going to get hurt eventually. We think he's going to get hurt eventually, but I think that the Connor Jamo side is the more explosive side, at least this season. I would tend to stand pat on that. I'd keep Connor and Jameson Williams.
Tend to agree there as much as I do love me some DJ Moore. Not there yet on that passing offense. 10-team Dynasty PPR Superflex 3-0 and hurting for a reliable running back 1. One guy in the league.
Yeah, be hurting too bad. You're up 3-0. You're up 3-0 right now.
Hey, sometimes it's a dogfight for those wins.
Right.
Guy in his league swindled Bijan, JT, and Josh Jacobs is being really stubborn with trades. I have 3 firsts and 2 seconds. Look, I've been in this situation actually last season. I was hanging in there for the playoff race on the strengths of quarterbacks and receivers, but couldn't for the life of me buy a running back. I just keep at it. Teams will get more and more desperate as you get throughout the season. Don't overpay too much, but at a certain point, if it's a marginal overpay, it's whatever. The market within every league is a little bit different, so I would just try to say, balance, again, your league has a unique market, so if running backs are just by virtue of this guy hoarding them all a little bit more valuable, a little bit more expensive, then maybe, you're willing to pay a little bit more, but don't go, overboard, don't go desperate. You're 3-0, if you're going to be in the playoff push at 3-0 more than likely. I mean, there's certainly skids, they happen, but I wouldn't be, again, desperate for a running back.
And see if you can send something back that sweetens the guy's roster, as opposed to just the picks there. If you can send him something back that actually helps his roster out, that's what he wants. He wants to have the best roster possible. He knows that if he gives up one of these running backs, he's not getting back something from you that is going to make his roster better this season like that, if all he's getting is picks. And picks are unknown, and they carry more and less value depending on what season of the year we're in. If you can package 1 or 2 or whatever those picks with something that actually helps his roster out, maybe you've got a lot of wide receivers and you can give him one that bumps him up, and now he's got a flex player, whereas before he was just throwing any old garbage out there or whatever. See if you can do something like that for him to try and sweeten that pot a little bit, rather than just trying to pry those guys away with picks.
All right, one last question before we move on to offensive observations. Isaac, is Richardson unstartable this week? Should I sit him for Purdy? We are going to get into this in further depth here in a little bit, but just real quick. Chase, Purdy or Richardson?
Purdy.
Chris?
Go Purdy.
I would probably tend to agree, especially with that Steelers pass rush.
Steelers defense is going to,
Look, I'm a Colts fan. I'm a little bit biased. I think the most fun matchup across the NFL this week is the Colts offensive line, which has quietly played out of their minds, versus that Steelers pass rush. I think it's going to be really fun. But all right, let's get into some offensive observations.
You find me offensive, I find you offensive for finding me offensive.
Yeah, so we're skipping over our defense this week, I guess, Adam, so that
Sorry. You want to hit that real quick?
No, it's okay, because what I can do is easily cover it, and you did a great job for me. My defensive play of this week, dominant defensive play of the week, is that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I know your offensive line has played incredible. The only problem is your quarterback is not playing so incredible. I think he's going to get to throw the ball to other teams. I also think they're having an easy time keeping him in the pocket, and that pressure has been a problem for them overall. So I think this is a defense that I would like to play. But that gets me onto what I wanted to talk to for offensive observations. And gentlemen, I don't want to be gloom and doom, and I don't want this to be all over again. But we talk about Anthony Richardson. We talk about different things. We got excited because we saw Jaden Daniels actually pull the trigger and throw to Terry McLaurin, even though we know he was wide open like 500 times before he plays. What is going on where we've watched somebody like Andy Dalton, who has not played but one game in 2 years, come off the bench and look like a competent quarterback, create a Carolina offense that we've mocked at length, an offense and a defense that was atrocious, was able to kind of save face because the offense wasn't so bad. And then I flipped the channel and I'm watching Baker Mayfield, who had been a darling, throw for $169. Derek Carr throw for $122. And I'm not trying to ask you guys for all the answers, but as fantasy guys, we need to kind of figure out this quarterback situation and what's going on and what we can kind of, hang our hats on. So the first question I'm going to ask you guys, and it might sound crazy, but this is offensive observations. Are we going to get to a point this season where we're actually going to prefer to have the backup quote unquote quarterbacks than the actual starters? And the examples I will give you, for example, is Malik Willis, who we mocked at length for the last 2 years, came out as one of the better quarterbacks you could have had on your lineup last week. A guy who completed 13 and 19 passes for 202 yards, ran for 70 yards, coming off a game where he had one incompletion. And we all know, and I think LaFleur did a tremendous job, but we all knew what the Green Bay Packers were going to do. And yet they were still effectively able to accomplish it. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's never played football. That Jacksonville Jaguars offense couldn't get past, half that midfield to save their lives. So, gentlemen, are we looking at a situation where we'd rather have some of these unknown guys this year, maybe even moving forward, than some of these big-time names who are getting paid but yet not producing?
I don't know that I'm willing to bail on all of the top guys just yet. And I'm definitely never going. I kind of alluded to it in our opening segment there. If I have a choice between Jordan Love, even if Jordan Love's 90%, and he stays healthy and stays in and plays the whole game, I will choose Jordan Love over Malik Willis every single time. Now Malik Willis can do some fun things, and he can be, I think he showed in the last 2 weeks that there's the possibility he could be a fantasy asset in the right position. If Love re-aggravates that injury, gets a different injury, or what, it has to miss time for whatever other reason, Malik Willis would be somebody I would consider rostering, because I think he can do some things and score us some points there. But, the guys who start in this league for a reason. There are always going to be guys who can score more and less fantasy points for you. But, Josh Allen is still scoring you fantasy points and balling out. Jaden Daniels is a running quarterback doing what we thought he would do. Lamar Jackson is doing things. Kyler Murray is doing things that we thought he would do. Dak Prescott is quarterback 7 overall still right now. Jalen Hurts is quarterback 8, not quarterback 1, 2, or 3 like some people drafted him, but he's still a top 8 quarterback. Now, there have been some surprises. I don't think anybody expected Sam Darnold to be QB4 after 3 weeks. But I tend to agree with the premise that the star quarterbacks are the star quarterbacks for a reason. They're the guys that we want. And I'm not necessarily ready to jump off of that ship. It's only week 3 of the season. I'm not diving off of any of the top tight ends right now just yet. I'm not ready to dive off of any of the top quarterbacks just yet. So I'm willing to play some of those guys, and I'm happier having some of those guys now, like a Baker Mayfield as my quarterback 2. There might come a time at some point this year where it looks like Baker Mayfield should be starting in front of Anthony Richardson. If you have that kind of decision, yeah, then you might go with Baker Mayfield. But on the whole, I think we're sticking with the top quarterbacks.
So Adam, for that situation, take the Pittsburgh Colts situation. A lot of people spent a lot of draft capital on Anthony Richardson, and Justin Fields looks like he's going to be the starter this week. Justin Fields coming off a nice game versus the Chargers, whose defense was supposed to be pretty good, but Justin Fields had one of his best games he's had. The Colts on the other high end really struggled offensively. We haven't seen them score. I think they had 14 points in a 10-minute period. And over the last 160 minutes since then, they've scored 3 points. So this is an offense that's just really, really struggling. So, are we starting this week where we can start a Fields over Richardson, or are we going to continue to, Chase is saying, is this something we just continue to wait on and keep buying our time?
I think you continue to wait, but I think in the meantime you play that guy. Look, I think it's better to be safe than sorry, especially in fantasy. There's limited weeks here. So play the guy you're more confident in right now. But as far as an offense like the Colts, for example, I see good signs, not in the sense of, look, Richardson's rough, but there's a stark difference between a Bryce Young and an Anthony Richardson to me. And that stark difference is when you see Richardson, you still see a guy that is confident in himself. You hear him in his presser afterwards. He has, he's looking guys in the eye. He's confident. He's owning his mistakes, but he's confident in himself to actually fix them. And by the end with Bryce Young, you saw, a guy who just looked defeated. And I don't think you see that yet. And I think, the weapons in Indianapolis, Pittman hasn't necessarily, played his best ball, but some of these other guys are playing very good ball. I mean, we are seeing a Donnie Mitchell, overall look good as a route runner, as a separator. Alec Pierce is, playing the ball that, candidly, I thought he was capable of coming out, finally. Thank God. They're getting Josh Downs back. The offensive line, again, I mean, on PFF, they're the number one, both run blocking and pass blocking offensive line so far. And it's a 3-week sample size, but the offensive line is good. So I think on one hand, you have some optimism for late in the season, but on the other hand, look, there's growing pains there. I think they're trying to find the balance between last year when they were super conservative with Richardson and managed to get him on a kind of schedule, and now they're like trying to let him trial by fire, figure things out, and there's got to be some kind of balance found. And until they find that balance, would I be begging to play him? No. Do I think that they find something eventually? Probably, at least to get, to the point where a running quarterback with that skill set can be fantasy viable. Now we'll see the product on the field, but I do think the fantasy product will come. But, again, there's limited weeks in fantasy football. It's less than the NFL season. So, to me, I would be looking at other starting options in the short term.
All right, and then to continue on that point, moving forward, is this something that with this quarterback situations, I'm going to have to start getting used to the receivers? All of a sudden, I call it the Greg Dortch numbers. So when we have, Aaron Rodgers supposedly is looking back like vintage Aaron Rodgers. He was 6 for 6 out of the pocket. We should all be excited because Aaron Rodgers is going to light it back up again. And I look at my, score sheet, and I see we have Wilson has 33 yards, 5 catches. Now he had the touchdown. Drake London's, having his breakout season, but he's getting like 72 yards on 6 catches. Blake Neighbors is a superstar, but 78 catches on 2 touchdowns. Is this going to be the new thing where we're not going to be getting guys over the 100 yards and we're going to aiming more and more for touchdown-dependent players where you're looking for the guys for, the combined stats? Is this now something that we need to find and just kind of settle it? We're going to be getting a lot of receivers getting 6 catches for 60 or 70 yards and praying to God they get the touchdowns.
I think, I've always been big for, and I mean, this isn't some revelatory thing I'm going to tell everybody here, but I've always been big on the guys who get the most targets. If the more targets you get, the more opportunities you have to catch the damn football. And the opportunities you have for yards and first downs and scores and all the things that make us happiest when our guys get them. You might have to do your homework here. If the league is moving in this direction where, if we're not going to necessarily see guys completing, 70% of their passes, that kind of thing. And if we're going to be seeing guys have more of the Deshaun Jackson type, stat lines and Tyler Lockett stat lines where 31 week and 3 for 30 the next week, you may have to just do your homework a little bit more, and you're going to have to be more cognizant during your draft of who's getting the most looks and who's got the best opportunity to continue to have a steady floor. I've never liked drafting guys like Deshaun Jackson. I was never a big Tyler Lockett fan. I've said that on air repeatedly through the course of my career, if you guys have followed me at all, because I hate the guessing game. If more guys are going to be part of the guessing game, we might all have to play it, but it means that, hey, if it makes those guys who are not the guessing game, it makes those guys who are going to have that safe week to week opportunity. It makes those guys even more valuable, and you want to do what you can to get your hands on them.
I do think we're going to see those stat lines continue for at least a little bit. Look, I think the difference between the pro game and the college game has really never been higher. It's ridiculous. The way offensive lines play are completely different. And what you exploit in secondaries, specifically to answer like this, is completely different. I think the way that, if you look how in zone, how corners and safeties pass players off in coverage, how they communicate. It's just a night and day difference between Saturday and Sunday, like night and day. And you can see that in some of these rookie quarterbacks. The pick that I believe Bo Nix threw in week 2, I want to say, that's a completion in the college game. It is. It is just a matter of you can fit that in because the pass off from one guy in one zone to the other guy in the other zone, it's not going to be that efficient versus it's a split second, like, hey, guys coming to your zone, and then they're there. Like, they're expert communicators, and it's just not happening in the college game. And that's something that I just don't think that young quarterbacks are ready for. And that's why when we do see the Andy Daltons, or last year with Joe Flacco or Aaron Rodgers, these veteran quarterbacks that have been through this, that have seen single high for so long, that have been playing against these excellent communicators, they're still excelling. They're having success, but the receivers aren't used to it. You know, the young guys, the young quarterbacks aren't used to it. And as a result, everyone's just checking the football down because that's where they can actually find the opening. You know, there's only a few guys who have been in the league long enough to know how to actually throw the ball down the field, in the middle of the field against too high. And it's, you know, the guys who are happening to, you know, lose some arm strength and, you know, don't have receivers who are necessarily on the same page with them because, look, the lifespan of receivers is only so long. There's only a handful of receivers who are still at the top of their game and have been in the league long enough to remember, you know, when too high is as common as it is now. I mean, it's like Devontae, kind of, like Kupp, Hopkins, a couple other guys, but like these are the only guys who have really experienced this. So when it comes to a guy like Garrett Wilson, you know, he's seeing completely different defenses than what he saw in college. So he's not necessarily always going to be on the same page with an Aaron Rodgers who has seen these types of defenses before. And remember, a lot of these option routes are more popular than they've ever been in the pro game as well. So if your quarterback, receiver are on different pages, we're going to have an issue. So I think on the whole, it's incentivized to check down a lot. And again, especially given going back to the beginning, offensive lines are completely different in the pro game and the collegiate game as well. So with offensive line talent being in the worst position it's been in my lifetime at the very least, I mean, it sucks. The offensive lines around the league are horrible. On the whole, people can't figure out the secondaries. The offensive lines can't block. So you check down, and that's how we end up with Malik Neighbors getting like 20 targets and 80 yards. Like that's what that results in. So to answer your question, yeah, I think these stat lines, at least in the short term, in the interim, I think they're here to stay.
All right, before we move on here, before we get Chris's answer to that, we got a bunch more questions that have popped up here on the stream, boys. Let's look at Anton Montez. He says he's got a 12-man half PPR league. He wants us to start 3, 1 wide receiver spot, 2 flex spots. Kind of irrelevant because he only gave us 1 running back here to name anyway. But he wants us to pick 3 of these guys: Ayuk, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Brian Robinson, or Deontay Johnson. Chris, who do you got there? Who you want to pick for him?
I'm going Brian Robinson, Deontay Johnson, and I'm going to go Chris Olave.
Okay. Adam.
I'm torn between Deontay and Garrett Wilson, but otherwise that same group. Definitely Ayuk is left out.
Okay. I'm not going to start Garrett Wilson. I'll talk about him a little bit later, but I don't want Garrett Wilson this week, and there are reasons for that. I'm going to go with Chris Olave. I'm going to go with Brian Robinson, and then for me, it's a toss-up between Ayuk and Johnson. We're still going to be missing receivers this week, and Deebo Samuel is still missing this week in San Francisco, but Ayuk just does not seem like he knows what he's doing since he got his new contract. Congratulations. At least you're making some money. Deontay Johnson, however, does look like he's waking up. So I'll go with Olave, Robinson, and Johnson myself. All right, Anton, I hope that helped you out there. Now we've got Dominic Hammerquist. He says, who should I drop Dowdle for? He has Dowdle, and he's wondering if he should drop him for either Swift, Ladd McConkey, or Zamir White, or should he just keep Dowdle? I will start with this one. Dude, just hang on to Dowdle. Swift has been abysmal in Chicago. There's no guarantee he hangs on to that job, but whoever gets that job, there's no guarantee that it's a great job anyway. Ladd McConkey, I mean, he'd be the only one I might consider, but again, that's not a passing offense. He's going to be way up and down and very mercurial for you. Zamir White has looked absolutely terrible. Dowdle looks like he might be the best option they have there at running back in Dallas. He has taken the bulk of the work. Zeke is not the lead dog in that backfield. Honestly, I would hold serve and keep Dowdle. But Adam, what's your thoughts on that?
I would consider McConkey, but if you want a running back, I'd keep Dowdle. I am pretty much done with Zamir White and Swift.
Chris?
I would drop Boggle for any of those three, and if I'm picking, I would pick Zaire White right now.
Woo, okay. That's bucking the trend. Atta boy. All right, well, take that. I guess it's who do you like best there, Dominic? Whose advice do you want to take the most? And then let's go one more here before we move on here. We got Cold the Savage there. He says sell Hurts, Evans, and Mason for Burrow, Tyreek, and Kenneth Walker. Chris, would you be selling Hurts, Evans, and Mason to get back Joe Burrow, Tyreek Hill, and Kenneth Walker III?
No, I mean, I don't see the point of this deal. I think it's a wash at best again. I like Kenneth Walker's upside and his talent, but he's already banged up. Jordan Mason's going to be good for you for at least 8 weeks, 9 weeks. There's no guarantee Kenneth Walker's going to make for the season, so I can understand maybe looking down the hill. But Tyreek Hill right now, has no Tua Tagovailoa. He's struggling. He's one of the worst streaks he's had in his career. Mike Evans, I know he hasn't had a good game, but still he's Mike Evans, and Baker Mayfield does look for him. Burrow's being okay. So, yeah, for me, I'm not pulling the trigger. Jalen Hurts is still one of the better quarterbacks you can have.
Adam, your 2 cents?
Yeah, I'm not doing the deal personally.
No, I agree. So that's 3 for 3. We're all saying hold serve there, Cold the Savage. All right, Chris, we're going back to you for offensive observations.
No, I think that was my final thing. I think that one of the things we're going to get to next week, as you guys kind of alluded to, I want to talk about what are some of the things that we're going to start looking for trends-wise. Are we going to have to start looking at players differently? Because this is something, is definitely not just becoming a problem this year. It's been a problem we've seen for the last couple of years. Scoring's supposed to be up, but the quarterback play hasn't been. And I don't want to necessarily give life to people like Mel Kiper, whose stupid idea of, outlawing zone defenses because people can't figure out how to, throw the ball.
That's all the airtime we're going to give that concept, by the way.
Well,
so, yeah.
But I also want to point out somebody like Malik Willis was 13 for 19, was 11 for 12 the week before. So even people like Anthony Richardson, even some of these quarterbacks that we're trying to figure out reasons that we can figure it out, there's something that can be fixed in a way that not happening throughout the league. So there is ways to make these guys look better. But what I want to move on is definitely to Adam, because Adam, I need to know whose temperature we're checking.
Yeah, we are going to look at some Dynasty fantasy football. Switch gears a little bit right in a sec.
Hot air, so hot in here.
Well, thank you for that introduction. We're going to real quick get through the Dynasty temperature check this week. We're going to look at 3 players who are on the move. We're going to look at 3 players who are on the move often over the past little bit here in Dynasty, over the past week or so, and gauge what the market's looking like. Are these deals that we want to make? Are these guys that we're trying to sell? Are these guys we're trying to buy? Again, these are the guys who are super marketable. They're on the move a lot. These are guys who you can be selling. And there's likely someone in your league that is willing to actually buy them, right? Because a lot of the times you're like, oh, well, the trade calculator says a guy is worth this, but nobody actually wants him in your league, or vice versa. You're trying to buy a guy, but the guy's like, no, I'm not like last year. This year he's maybe a little more available, but last year Kelsey was a guy. It's like, oh, he's worth a 2nd-round pick, but it's like, yeah, nobody's selling Kelsey for a 2nd-round pick. That might have been what the calculator said, but nobody's doing it actually, in reality. All right, here are the guys who are actually going on the move. And we're going to start with Kansas City's running back and DFS member for this show, Carson Steele. We're going to kick this to you, Chase, but real quick. He is the 5th most traded player over the last week across a myriad of Dynasty platforms. He's the 3rd most traded running back on the ECR from Fantasy Pros. He is the RB 28 and half-point PPR on Keep Trade Cut. Over the last month, he is up 28 spots to running back 45. An example of some recent trades for Carson Steele, a 2025 second, 2025 third, Andy Dalton, and Panthers rookie wide receiver Xavier Legette. What we got, Chase?
Man, listen, if I had Carson Steele, he'd be my number 1 most traded running back in the whole thing, because listen, sell him as quickly as possible. If you have him in Dynasty, if you were the guy who, I guess, lucked out and got him off the waiver wire because nobody drafted his ass in rookie drafts this year. If you have Carson Steele, sell him now, because now is as much as you're ever going to get for him, because everybody's hopped up. Everybody's hyped about him. There is nothing at all special about Carson Steele as a player. Maybe he has a big heart. I don't know. Great. Good for him. He's an NFL caliber athlete because he's in the league. And he's playing for Andy Reid, and that's good, great, wonderful. I'm sure he's a good man, and his mother loves him. But there's nothing special about him as a football player. He's not super fast. He's not super strong. He's not super anything. He's not shifty. He's just a dude who happened to make the roster, and then the starter got hurt. And for that matter, he is only the temporary starter for right now. We know that. All right. Pacheco is on IR, but he may be gone for 8 weeks, but 2 months from now, you're going to have a worthless Carson Steele on your hands. Or you could have a worthless Carson Steele sooner than that if CEH comes back and they give him the job. I don't know why they would, but they might. Or keep in mind, like we mentioned earlier, Kareem Hunt has been signed to that active roster. He's the guy that I tend to put my stock on. I know you guys think he's washed. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but who the hell else is in this backfield who can carry the load? It's a top offense. I already said we're taking Carson Steele for our DFS cocktail this week, because I think this is the last week he's usable. I think that after this, that backfield either belongs to Kareem Hunt or becomes a complete and total cluster with everybody involved, and no one is going to score enough points to keep anybody happy. If you have him, sell him. He's that classic guy who you can play in DFS this year. You don't really want him on your redraft rosters. And if you got him in Dynasty, he's just what we call a roster clogger. 17 rushes, 72 yards, no touchdowns last week. Averaged 4.2, a long rush of 9, because that's all the speed he can muster, everybody. He caught 1 of 2 targets for 2 yards. He's nothing special. Sell him as quick as you can.
All right, good to hear. I would tend to agree. If I can get a second-round pick for Carson Steele, I'm pulling the trigger.
I would jump
immediately.
On that. I couldn't hit accept fast enough, and then I'd buy the guy a drink at the next draft.
Absolutely. All right, we have actually a player who Carson Steele came up as a guy who's been traded for, and that's new Carolina Panthers starter Andy Dalton. This is going to go to Chris. It's the 4th most traded player, 2nd most traded quarterback over the last week. And the ECR, he's actually up to QB 23. So that means, according to the ECR, you're starting him in a super flex league. And keep trade cut, he is up 52 spots in the last month, which is insane to say. He was QB 87 or somewhere in there. Now QB 35 in Dynasty circles. Examples of some trades also: 2025 seconds and thirds. Carson Steele again. Saw one for Rashad White, which is interesting. Zach Moss and Jalen Polk of the New England Patriots. So, Chris, at those costs, are you just riding them out and, hey, I've got a cheap guy for some of these injuries? The quarterback position, especially, we saw how many injuries at the quarterback position there were last year. Or you're like, all right, I'll sell it come on, it's Andy Dalton.
Yeah, look, if I have 2 quarterbacks, he's my only second quarterback, Adam, and I have absolutely no options, I guess you got to hold on to him unless you can find something. But otherwise, yes, I'm chopping him as best as I can. At best, this guy finishes out the year. That's not even a guarantee. More than likely, Carolina's going to try to get Bryce Young another shot at some point. Andy Dalton did it great. It's still Andy Dalton. Let's not get it twisted. We're not forgetting who this guy is. And this offense isn't necessarily a juggernaut. Carolina isn't a great team. They played a Raiders team. Let's not forget who the Raiders are. This is a team that lost 2 years ago to Baker Mayfield after we have one practice for the Rams. This is a team that had got Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Clausen kicked out of the town because of their atrocious losses the last 2 years. So this Raiders team has a history of doing things like this. I wouldn't get too excited, and I'm definitely not going to try to hold on for A. Dalton for a gold mine. But I do think, Adam, if I'm a team that has 2 quarterbacks, I'm not going to necessarily give them away. I'm not going to look just to unload them for just whatever. I'm going to make sure I get some kind of value, and I wouldn't want to get overpaid for them.
Yeah, if I can get a good value for him, I'm definitely selling Andy Dalton, but he is someone who, if I need some spot starts right now, I'm willing to cling to for the time being, because there's a chance he loses the job eventually. I think he has it for at least a few weeks now. I think he played well enough for that. But to your point, let's keep into consideration that the Raiders are by far the worst coverage team in the NFL right now. Like, not even really up for much debate. Their secondary is awful. I say that as a Colts fan. Our secondary is awful.
If he has a big week this week, you might be able to actually snag a little bit more on Andy Dalton. So yeah, maybe wait this week, see what you can get. But yeah, if anybody's willing to toss you something, toss it.
All right, I'm gonna leave this for the group. Tank Dell, who is the 7th most traded player. He is the 2nd most traded wide receiver. On the ECR, he is still wide receiver 30 and half-point PPR. And keep trade cut, however, he is down 9 spots over the last month, down to wide receiver 28. Some recent trades include late 2025 first, or prospected late 2025 first, some seconds. Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver Yoshivas, who I have figured out how to say his name, another Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver in T. Higgins, and veteran Minnesota Vikings running back Aaron Jones. Guys, are we buying or selling on Tank Dell at the current moment?
Tank Dell is young. His quarterback loves him. He can't be covered. Keep him.
Yeah, I'm keeping Tank Dell. I like Tank Dell. Look, but I do think, Adam, some of those trades you talked about aren't necessarily things I'm just going to stick my nose up. If you can get a late first rounder for Tank Dell, you might be able to upgrade a better receiver. But I think there's guys that, I'm not looking to get rid of Tank Dell for just because.
Everybody's got a price. I mean, yeah, if somebody tosses something ridiculous at you, you jump on it no matter who we're talking about. But for the most part, I am not looking to sell Tank Dell.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I like Tank Dell. I think that, this season's going to improve for him, but a first-round pick.
Stephon Diggs won't be there forever either.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I do think, look, passing around the league is going to be rough this season. That's a team that I do think has a really good shot to make some strides and improve and be a little more valuable for fantasy purposes.
We got some more viewer questions here. We got to jump on real quick here. Antonio Lopez here real quick wants to know Waddle and Chubb for Jacobs. Which side of that are you on? Just one word here, Adam. Waddle, Chubb, or Jacobs?
Jacobs. I'm just keep me the best player.
Chris, Waddle and Chubb or Jacobs?
Jacobs.
I say Jacobs too. So Antonio, I guess you're holding here, unless you're the one who's getting, Jacobs. Okay. Jose Rivera says he got offered Lamb and Bijan for Kamara and Godwin. His running backs are Achane, Hall, Walker, Ford. Wide receivers are Chase, Higgins. I can end up with Lamb, Bijan, Chase, and Hall. Is a 12-man league. He ended up making a lot of trades. So do you take the Lamb and Bijan for Kamara, Godwin?
Keep making trades, dude.
Hell yeah.
Keep making trades.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, if you can end up with Lamb, Bijan, Chase, and Hall, you jump on that, shiznit. Jose Rivera. Good work, my friend. 12-team league, 10-team league, 8-team league. I don't care who you are. That would be all right there. So keep going what you can do there. Juan Pena Jr. says, who for my wide receiver 1 and 2 and running back 1 and 2 and flex? So we're setting his lineup here, guys. He's got Yoshivas, Pierce, Ridley, DJ Moore, Tank Dell, Jawan Jennings, Wandale Robinson, Breece Hall, Carter. Okay. Out of everybody that's there, we need 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex. So I will start, and I'll set your wide receivers right now, dude. Juwan Jennings is one of your wide receivers for this week, so you're going to be starting him. Across from him, ouch, Ridley, Moore, Dell, and Robinson. Or Jalen Naylor. Addison may not play this week. If Addison doesn't play this week against the Packers, I might consider Naylor. If Addison plays, now we're probably talking about either DJ Moore or Tank Dell. We just talked about Tank Dell. Houston matching up against Jacksonville. I don't know that they're going to have to pass a lot, but Jacksonville kind of sucks. So wide receiver, probably starting Juwan Jennings and Tank Dell. Hey, Chris, why don't you tell us who we're going to start for running backs here?
I think he should go Breece Hall for Kyron Williams, and then I would start the flex and go Josh Jacobs in my flex.
All right. Yeah, Adam, do you have a different idea on that flag? Because I would agree. I think it's Williams and Hall for sure are going to be the running backs. We don't know about Kenneth Walker's playing status yet, but is there somebody you like better in the flex than Josh Jacobs, or are you going with Jacobs?
Going Jacobs.
All right. Well, there you have it, son. Juan Pena Jr., you're starting Tank Dell, Juwan Jennings, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, and you're going to put Josh Jacobs in your flex. Actually, whoever's got the latest slot of your three running backs is going to go in your flex. But there you go, Juan. And let's hit Steve 562 says, "What's going on, fellas? Not much. We're doing a show, dude. Should he read trade? I assume that means Carr and Worthy, Derek Carr, and Xavier Worthy for Aaron Jones." Chris, start with you.
Yeah, I love Worthy's upside, but I think it's going to be tough to figure out what you're going to get week to week. While Aaron Jones is a guy that, as long as he's in that offense and healthy, he's going to be a guy they look for to utilize both the passing attack and the rushing attack, and they love him in the red zone. And then for me, I'm going the running back. Derek Carr has been great, but with McCoy, that's going to be a completely different offense. So I think that I'd pull the trigger on that trade.
I'm on the Aaron Jones side.
All right,
myself.
Adam, what do you think there? Was that?
Aaron Jones side myself.
Yeah, I think depending on what you've got going on for quarterback, I assume you already have a quarterback, unless maybe you drafted a Richardson and you're wigging out or whatever. But the Jones side of that trade is probably the one I want to come away from. I think that you can find equivalent value to Derek Carr elsewhere, even off of the waiver wire right now. Xavier Worthy is going to be mercurial. He's going to be up and down. Aaron Jones is the way to go on that one. And with that, we're going to move on to crush and bust there, Adam.
Yeah, real quick, let's run through. We got some bets in from our fearless leader, Dan Mader, who, again, if you missed the open of the show, is dealing with some technical difficulties with the laptop.
Technical difficulties are still technically difficult.
Exactly. All right, let's just run through his bets real quick. Jaden Daniels over 218.5 passing yards over the last 2 games in a row. It is gaining confidence as a passer as his air yards per attempt has increased each game going against an Arizona defense that has allowed the 4th most passing yards per play so far this season. That's a good bet. Joe Burrow over 265.5 passing yards. Cincinnati is 0-3 playing against a Carolina team that has allowed the 8th most passing yards per play with T. Higgins back and Cincinnati's back against the wall. He believes they will come out with nothing holding them back in the offense as they try to get their first win of the season. Dalton competent quarterback play helps this on the other side as this game could stay competitive throughout. Brock Purdy over 232.5 passing yards. Purdy has the 2nd most passing yards in the league to this point and facing a New England defense that is allowing the 6th most passing yards per game and 7th most EPA per pass. Look for George Kittle to return this week as well to help that. Hey, maybe we're going to see the rise of some passing yards this week, finally get the ball moving down the field. I do like these 3 bets in particular, so thank you, Dan, for sending those in. Couldn't
Love
make it on
you,
stream.
Dan. Come back quick.
Absolutely. All right, now, as you mentioned, let's get into that crush or bust.
And I'll crush you like a paper cup.
Woo.
All right. Yeah, we're getting into crush or bust. Our crushes are going to be the guys who we think are going to crush it this week. They're the must starts, and our busts, of course, are the guys who we think, are some landmines, some problems waiting to happen in your lineups. We're trying to get them out of your lineups. I'm going to start off with Najee Harris versus the Indianapolis Colts defense. Look, this is a team that is light at linebacker physically. There's some small linebackers. In the front seven is starting Taven Bryan, who, look, if you're a Jaguars fan, you know Taven Bryan is not good at football. In the grand scheme of humanity, he is, kind of to steal your thunder there, Chase. But, in the NFL, he's a bad DT. He should never be a starter anywhere in the NFL. That's just the reality of the situation. The skill sets fit well to beat a more finesse team, a la the Bears, who Swift couldn't get anything going on the ground. But this is absolutely a run defense and a front seven that can be out-physicaled when they're missing someone like DeForest Buckner, when the team's playing the way that they currently are. So I think this is a defense that is moving in the right direction. I think they're going to continue to move in the right direction, but progress is not always linear, and this is a bad matchup. The Steelers have had their numbers in recent years. I think Najee has a good chance to get in the end zone. He's been running okay so far this season. So
I like it.
Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Duns or Dunze, or however Adam wants to say his last name. But I'm going to go with Rome. A guy has his first 100-yard game last week. A guy that I think is going to wind up being the alpha we actually have on our DFS team as well. Chase talked about earlier in the show. I think he saw over double-digit targets last week. A guy that looked to stretch the field. I think him and Caleb are going to get back on track again this week. I think they're going to continue to throw the ball over to the Rams. The secondary is questionable at best. Rams offense, was able to pull out a miracle versus that defense or versus the 49ers, but you saw Juwan Jennings go crazy. You saw different receivers being involved in that game. So I'm going to go with Rome Odunze or Duns.
Whichever, either way. Chase, what do you got?
Listen, my crush this week is literally any Bills pass catcher. Okay, I'm talking about the top three there of Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, or Keon Coleman. The Ravens give up the second most points to tight ends. They give up the fifth most points to wide receivers. Now, some of that is a function of the fact that they faced the Chiefs and the Cowboys, but those two games were sandwiched around Gardner Minshew throwing for 276 against them. 110 of those points went to Devontae Adams on 9 catches. So, facing the Bills, who are a middle-tier run team, they're completing 75% of their passes, though. The Bills are completing short passes, and they've been very efficient this year in the pass game, okay? Buffalo's game plan should be to throw early, throw often. So I say fire up all three of them. Coleman was leading the team's wide receivers in snaps. I know he had a little bit of a down week last week, but going into last week, he was leading that team's wide receivers in snaps and in routes run. And he was benched in the first quarter last week. If you haven't heard this, Keon Coleman was benched in the first quarter last week for disciplinary reasons. He was basically, I think he was late to some team meetings. Okay. But had he played the full game, his numbers would have been a lot closer to what we saw in the first 2 weeks in terms of his routes run and his snaps that he's played. That whole situation is over. Don't be scared off. I like Kincaid, Shakir, and Coleman because I think that game is going to be a slugfest, and they're going to have to throw in that.
Tend to agree there. And Chase, do you want to read off what Dan has as well?
Yeah, Dan's crush of the week is T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals. We've talked about him a little bit in the show so far, but listen, in his first game back, he had the second most snaps on the team and the second most routes run. Physically, he looked good. Didn't look like there were any limitations there. Yes, it only resulted in 3 catches, 39 yards, but listen, he has a plus matchup this week versus the Panthers. They're allowing the 8th most passing yards per play in the league this year. Expect T. Higgins to become a top 24 wide receiver, which we've known him to be. Expect that to happen sooner rather than later. Put him in your lineups this week. Be ahead of the game on that one. T. Higgins is Dan's crush of the week. He's got him at ranked number wide receiver 19. ECR, T. Higgins is wide receiver 26.
Cool. On to the bus of the week, and this one hurts me because it's a player who I very much so like, and I do think is going to be really good this season. But that's Jamison Williams. This is by far the best defense that Detroit has played, and that's wild saying about a Seattle team where the defense wasn't necessarily super good last season. But look, the secondary has been much improved. Tariq Woolen specifically, he was getting benched at points last season, and this season has definitely come out and been a lot more close to the year prior. Look, they've been testing him deep down the field. The yards per depth of target against him is fairly high, but nobody's completing on him. He's been tested down the field, and he's defending it very, very well, passing those tests with A's every single time. So I like his ability to zero out a deep threat down the field. This is also a good pass rush. Not great, but a good pass rush. And Goff this season so far has been atrocious under pressure. That's been his biggest weakness so far this season is Goff under pressure. It's been rough. And this is one of the better pass rushes they've seen. And look, it's a good offensive line there in Detroit. I think they're going to do a pretty good job. But I think this is more of an Amon-Ra week than it is, going down the field with Jamison. I'm going to kick this to Chase.
All right. My bust for this week, listen, I hate to say it because I'm a big mark for this dude, but my bust for the week is Garrett Wilson, and here's why, everybody. He's going to get the Patrick Surtain treatment this week from the Denver defense, okay? Patrick Surtain, listen, wide receiver ones this year, and that's talking DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Mike Evans, have averaged about 2 catches and 5 fantasy points a game against him right now. All right. None of those teams has the quarterback that Wilson does. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than any of those other guys has, but the chemistry isn't quite there yet between Wilson and Rodgers. If you've watched them play, they looked like they might be getting there last week a little bit, but it's not quite there yet. You know who the chemistry is there with for Rodgers though? Alan Lazard. And it looks like Tyler Conklin is actually on the same page as Aaron Rodgers too. They could be good plays again. Listen, you're likely having to start Garrett Wilson. You drafted him probably first or second round or right around the turn there. You probably have to play him, but I'm going to be tempering expectations for him this week. His ECR right now, his expert consensus ranking is around wide receiver 14. I don't have him as a top 20 play this week. Patrick Surtain being a shutdown guy. They've got other options that Rodgers likes to throw to. He's been spreading the ball around. Garrett Wilson is a bust this week.
All right, Chris, kicking it to you.
It's an interesting one. Hopefully Garrett Wilson lines up in the slot a little bit. But yeah, for me, I'm going to go with DJ Moore, a guy who's been struggling all season. Look, it's not so much that I think I'm down on DJ Moore. It's that they have him at receiver 16 this week. A guy who's just had 78 yards, as I talked about earlier in the show. Half of those yards came on a Hail Mary at the end of the game. He has yet to score a touchdown. He had 10 targets last week, 8 targets the week before, 6 targets the week before. It's 30 yards, 50 yards, and 78, like I said last week. It's just not enough for you to have as a top 16 receiver in my book. So DJ Moore is not a guy who I'm thrilled to necessarily have in my lineup this week.
It hurts, but I can accept it for sure. All right, Chase, take us home with your iteration of Dan's pick.
All right, Dan's bust for the week here is Anthony Richardson, quarterback for the Colts. Yeah, Adam, hang your head, buddy. We feel for you. We've talked about him already. ECR has him at quarterback 12, so they've got him as a starter this week. Dan's got him down all the way down to QB 19. Now, listen, yes, rushing always will give Anthony Richardson an upside, but his passing woes and the turnovers that he's had with 5 interceptions and 2 fumbles in the last 2 games, they have made him a liability actually in fantasy and honestly on the field there for the Colts. Now to top it off, he's facing the Pittsburgh defense that's allowed the least fantasy points to quarterbacks in the league. It's time to wait out for a better matchup for Richardson to bounce back before you start him again. We mentioned earlier the idea of starting like a Baker Mayfield or maybe a Geno Smith or somebody else who is performing better than Richardson this week. Dan has Anthony Richardson as his bust of the week. Everybody out there who's got questions we haven't answered yet, because there are a few that we haven't answered yet, hit me up at Twitter at STTChaseFFB. I'll give you a couple answers. Maybe Adam will give you some answers. Catch us online. We'll give you some answers there. We appreciate you all watching.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, we're gonna hit you a little bit with the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. Again, reach us on Twitter. We'll answer some further questions. We're running up against time, but we will catch you in the next week.
We are here. We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com. Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.